This video is part one of a two-part series on feeding the force. This first part is going to be on the equipment, so it's going to be field gear. Part two is going to be the logistics side, the actual amounts of food. Now, this video came about because of a comment from Young Constitutionalist on the video for lessons learned from the Russian invasion of Ukraine 1 year in. He pointed out that he noticed, especially early in the war, a lot of units were getting a hold of mess gear wherever they could because they weren't getting that many prepared rations, or the stuff that they got had spoiled. He said it was really noticeable with the stuff in Mariupol. There was news footage of Ukrainian and Russian units going into stores, going into abandoned apartments and homes, looking for mess kits, and they didn't care if it was military or if it was civilian, looking for metal cooking pots, metal plates, utensils, metal cups, so that they could make their own food in the field with what they could forage or gather in the area when those MREs did not show up. So we're going to go here on what is the bare minimum you need from an individual up to about squad size. And then you can always scale up for larger for a platoon or company in your considerations. Now, every person at a minimum must have a mess kit. And I have here one of the Polish ones because this is as close as I can get to the type that the Russian military used to issue. And a canteen cup, or at least a metal cup. Preferably canteen cup, because you can use this over a fire to heat up water for drink or a small thing of soup. To use this stuff, you're also going to need utensils. At a minimum, you're going to need a spoon. You're going to need a fork. Bare minimum. Now, I would also say to put with this, to make it easier, you're going to need some type of cooking stand or heater. I did videos on this stuff a while ago. Cooking mess gear is something that I really push for a reason. Hopefully some of you figure that out. Now, you don't have to get a cook stand from a store, from a surplus market. You can also make it yourself. This actually is going to be something we're going to be experimenting with this week. And hopefully a video will be made on this probably next week. Now, you've used your stuff. You got to clean your stuff. You may not have a mess kit cleaning station set up because you might be just your individual squad out in the field. Well, at a minimum, I'd say you're going to need a green scratch pad. You can get these at any store. This is one that's cut in half. Include both pieces inside your mess kit. That way when the one gets too wore out, you can toss this and then use the other one. And it wouldn't hurt to have a washcloth to help with cleaning out your mess gear, cleaning off your utensils. Remember to wash these as much as you can and make sure to dry them. These do have a tendency to collect bacteria if they're just set out to dry and they are not cleaned. So that's for one individual. Well, what do we have next up from an individual? And that's a fire team. Fire team is made up of between 3 to 5 personnel. For that one, I'm going to recommend something like this, the U.S. Mountain Cook Set. Another video I did back when the channel was brand new. This was actually designed by the U.S. military to feed a fire team in the field. The lid is a fry pan. You have 2 pots. And I would recommend include in there a plastic or a metal, if you can find it, measuring cup, making sure you have at a minimum in measurements inside here 1/2 cup or 4 ounce, and 1 cup Mark's 8 ounce. That will come into play for part 2. Now, it doesn't have to be a U.S. Mountain cook set. There are also 4-person cook sets which will double for this, substitute. Now, along with this, you really should have some other utensils with it. First off, when you're making stuff, a spoon from a mess kit works just fine for stirring inside a pot. And depending on what is in here, if it's a rice dish, you can serve with this. If you're cooking some type of veggie, like you're boiling turnips, you're boiling carrots, you're boiling potatoes, boiling meat, whatever, well, a fork from a mess kit works for serving from that also. Now, when you get into the point of making soups and stews, you really should get yourself some type of cheap ladle. Used ones from thrift stores and garage sales work great. Recommendation, get a metal one, because you don't want to run the risk of you're cooking the stuff, you leave this too close to the fire, and if it's a plastic one, it could start melting or catch fire. Or I know I see people do this in their homes when they're making meals for holidays and stuff. While they're cooking, they're trying to be quick, they'll just leave the utensil in the pot while it's cooking on a stove. Well, if you're cooking over a fire, this exposed part here is outside the food. If it's exposed to a flame, melt, start on fire. Be careful with your utensils. If you're in a resistance situation, it's not like you can go out and replace them quickly. Now, I would also recommend you start thinking about also your drinks when you get up to fire team and definitely above. So some type of coffee pot. One that hopefully has a percolator inside so that you can put coffee grounds in that, heat the water boils, perks up into the coffee grounds, then you make coffee. This also obviously works for just boiling water that you can use for mixing in freeze-dried pouches or making some type of instant soups inside canteen cups and whatnot. I would not use the same coffee pot that you use for making coffee and hot water. I would not use that to also be the one that you use to purify water. Just a little bit of a health and safety thing on that. If you have to, make sure you use only potable, drinkable water, and scrub this out really good after you purify water before you actually make some type of drink inside here to clean out any garbage that could be inside. And remember, scrub down in the bottom of the pot. Now, we've got fire team. What should we be looking at for a squad? Here you're going to have to start looking at stock pots. This particular one came out to, when we were doing the calculations on this, came out to 8 to 10 quarts or 2 to 2.5 gallons. Dimensions on this one is roughly 9 inches high, 10 inches across, roughly. So this is more than large enough. When I was doing the breakdowns, more than large enough for cooking enough for a fire team or squad. Now, and this is just for one item, whether you're doing it as a soup or a stew. If you're doing your rice in this, beans in another one, you probably want 2 separate pots unless you're making it together as part of that particular recipe you're doing. But remember, with rice, cooked rice is 2 to 3 times the volume of uncooked dry rice. So keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out what size pot you need for your element. Now I would also recommend that once you're getting up into the stock pot size, think about getting an actual serving spoon so that you can better dish out your contents from in there onto people's mess kits if you're going that route. And then you're going to have to think about cleaning. Well, still have those, but really should be thinking about having some type of scrub brush. Just a simple dish brush. You can get them in the stores, usually packs of 2. Toss 1 in with it. And I would really think about at least 1, if not 2, dish towels. The reason for this is you may not have the time to follow the old field sanitation regulations for mess kit cleaning. The old U.S. military regulations concerning mess kit cleaning was you had it in the boiling water, you then pulled the stuff out, you sanitized it and so forth, and you then let it dry on its own. You may not have the time for that. So you go through, boil this up, clean it, clean some mess gear inside here, then go through, pull this off, clean it up, maybe do another quick heat up of water, clean it out, scrub it out with your washcloth, and then once it's all nice and clean, go through, dry it with the dish towel. Make sure to dry this and clean this on a regular basis like the washcloth. Cut down on bacteria. So that way this stuff gets packed as soon as possible. In case you got to boogie woogie out of the area because the enemy's getting too close, or you got to get on the mission. Now, we'll do a honorable mention here of your average size canning pot for you for consideration. Now, looking up stuff online, depending on the general size of the pot, they're going to be 16 to 20 quarts. That is 4 to 5 gallons. The particular measurements on this one is roughly 10 high, 13 across. So this thing you can cook by itself inside here 4 to 5 gallons worth of soup, stew, or cooked rice inside here. For when you're figuring out your logistics for what size items you need to feed your people. Hopefully this is getting you guys thinking now on the importance of this stuff. You're not always going to have MREs. You're not always going to have freeze-dried meals. Especially if you're a resistance force, you are going to get to a point you are going to have to make food in the field from scratch using what is available, what you can forage, what you can trade for, what you can find. At least you got an idea of what you need for minimum items here. And obviously, there's stuff you can add to this, like in the video I did on base camp cooking gear. Gives you a few ideas of other items that you can add to your pack to help out when you're back at base. Would I use stock pots like this when out on a patrol? Questionable if I had to. I probably would, but I'd probably only bring the smaller one. Maybe have a few of them with, and then have each individual squad do their own little mini mess areas, making their own individual meals. Now, part 2 for this is going to be on logistics, the actual numbers. And when I was doing them here, I was shocked. And it actually made me reconsider how much I put in a cache cluster and even some of the items that I have inside my cases on how they're made up for their ratios and quantities. And we will be kicking off that next one right after this. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and Militia movements, always remember Essayons.